It's really helpful when you're building a company culture to have phrases that you can reference between one another that call back to a story that's really helpful, and everyone knows what that story is, and you're kind of on the same page about it. And we have a few of these in our culture, and folks who have followed the Level story might know some of these closely. We've alluded to them on mission patches. We've alluded to them in the product at some point. Examples are like pork tacos. Everyone knows what pork tacos means if you've been following the Level story. Other examples, the juice cart. Like, we all kind of understand what that moment was, why it mattered, where it was in the history and the context of the story. And Jevels is one of them that I can take credit for.
Miz, excited to chat with you about Jevels. That's right, Jevels with a J. If you don't mind, why don't you take us to the beginning of this story and we can kind of go from there?
The backdrop is COVID. It's, I think, late 2020. I had joined a few months earlier, and I was responsible for making sure that our supply chain was in order for all orders that we were shipping out. And our numbers were much smaller back then. It wasn't like we were doing the kind of volume that we're doing today or that we hope to be doing in the future. We're talking a few hundred orders a week. But that added up quickly, and we had just turned on some subscription features. And so members were starting to get recurring deliveries, and a few promos and podcast mentions had hit. And so our order volume went up quickly. And part of the supply chain that's involved here are the devices themselves, which we actually don't purchase. Those are from the pharmacy. And so that's a whole separate transaction. But there's a lot of other accompanying materials. There's the boxes that we ship the Levels kit in. There's the insert cards with instructions on how to get started. And one piece of the kit that gets shipped are these performance covers that folks know. You'll probably see them all over our branding and our Instagram. They're these kind of like adhesive circular round covers that go over the performance cover that help hold it in place, especially if folks are living an active lifestyle, swimming, hiking, walking through door jams, putting on a shirt, whatever it might be. It's very easy to rip these sensors off. And so these performance covers really help hold those in place. They've got a pretty sleek look. They have a nice Levels L logo on them right in the center. And it's kind of just a touch point of the brand. Pretty important to us, especially in the early days for building awareness and getting people on board. So those go in the kit. We were shipping 4 per kit or something like this, 2 per sensor, so people can kind of replace them. And it's mid-COVID, supply chains are long. It took a bunch of time to get these shipped. And we ran into a delay with our manufacturer, and there was like a 3 to 4 month lead time. And we realized that orders were ramping up faster than we could get these shipped. And so we needed to start getting creative and look for alternatives. And so initially I pulled up the emails here, and I had some early emails to Sam and Josh being, hey guys, I think we're running below, totally on me. I should have seen this coming. I should have forecasted this better. But here we are, this happened. And so what do we think we can do? Here's some ideas. We can drop the number of patches per kit to 2, and that'll get us some runway, but we still will run out on this date, which is a few weeks out. We could potentially order unbranded patches. This was an idea that came from Josh, because he had done this in the early days before we had this relationship where we were just getting, the stock black performance covers. We could move to other colors. We can try and find other manufacturers. This isn't, this one we had dialed in a bunch of changes and edits to it that made it our own, but we could go to something else in the meantime. And ultimately what we decided was to order I think it was a few thousand, let's say 10,000 of these from the manufacturer that we already worked with, but without screen printing them. And that would take the delivery time down to like 30 days or something like this. And air cargo them in, pay a bunch extra on shipping, but we got to do what we got to do to keep orders moving and to keep members happy. And this was just a hiccup that we had to get past. So we went that approach. We all signed off on it, agreed that was the right way forward. And the plan then was to go intercept these in Hayward, California, which is in the East Bay, right over from San Francisco, like 30-minute drive, not hard to get to. So I went and intercepted the order. And then instead of sending it to TruePill, our fulfillment and pharmacy partner, brought it to a screen printer in the area that does like T-shirts and just marketing materials, and to see if they could screen print these for us. And we told them it was a rush job. We were running out of inventory like tomorrow. Can you guys pull an all-nighter and just get these out for us? We'll pay extra. We'll do what we have to. And so we rushed through that process. They proofed a few of them, got the positioning, got the size right, got the files, and all looked great. And then it came time for delivery, like a day or two later. TruePill accepted them, opened the box, uh, and just started getting them out. Like we had already proofed a few of them; they looked good. Started getting them out, and then slowly on social media and on support, we started seeing this J showing up, and realized I think it was actually a picture from Casey's dad, who had gotten his swag kit and like was really excited about this, and so the stickers were placed everywhere, and it was a J. And so we had a moment of just like, oh God, we rushed this job. We didn't proof this well enough, and kind of made a mistake here. We had another set of, let's say, 20,000 covers coming in the next few weeks that we had ordered earlier. And so we were able to kind of bridge the gap. But the lesson that we pulled from this is like, we're going to move fast. We're going to make mistakes. Owning those mistakes. I sent out an email explaining what had happened to the team, kind of covering our bases to say, we made this mistake. We're moving fast. We're trying to solve problems, but we missed the detail on this along the way. And that it's totally okay. I think the important thing to set in the culture was, we're going to make mistakes. There's no bad intent here. No one's not good at their job for letting this happen. And of course, the stakes get higher as the company gets larger and things start to change. And you do want some checks in place to make sure that we're not making preventable mistakes. But these things will happen, and it's totally okay. And let's just keep things in perspective on total impact here. It's early days. Only a few hundred people are going to see this, and it has kind of become a little joke internally that when something goes wrong or we make some kind of mistake from moving quickly, it's a Jevels moment, and we learn from it. We don't scar on the first cut. Try and improve where we can, but just take the learnings and be open in owning the things that go on versus trying to bury them or hide them. So I think there could have been an effort to say like, we've got these other ones coming soon. I can kind of arrange this, hope people don't see it. But instead, make a moment of it, learn from it, celebrate it in a way, and realize that when people make mistakes, they become ultimately like more valuable. If an engineer pushes a line of code that brings everything down, it's not like, you messed up, we don't want you here anymore. It's more like, stick around. You're not going to make that mistake again. And now we have all this institutional knowledge because you're now experienced in a sense.
What were you thinking, like that first time that we saw that J? Just tell me what was going on.
First off, we wasted a lot of money here. We burned a few $1,000s. In the scheme of things, not the worst case in the world, but there's definitely an element of waste involved. There was some thoughts around like, could we have prevented this? Can we have avoided this? I think we had used that screen printer previously for a similar job, and they did the job okay. And so we had some like built-in trust, but we didn't verify the second time that this next batch was proofed correctly. We rushed them, and we kind of like caused the problem by pushing them to move so quickly. And I think what actually might have been like, I don't know if it was mirrored in the photo or they FaceTimed us to show it to us, and we said, yes, it's good. I think that was actually the detail. So we did proof it, but I don't know, they were using the camera and mirrored incorrectly. Like something went wrong where this happened. The thoughts going through my head is like, yeah, whoops, made a mistake here. Wasted a lot of money, was trying to move fast to fix a problem and kind of caused a different problem. But also realizing that I was working with a group of people with a high level of trust and a sense of, we're in this together. We collectively messed this up. It wasn't, Ms., you messed up, go ahead in a corner. It was, things happen. And in the scheme of things, this is really nothing at all, but it was a good learning moment. And I think the way the team rallied around it and made a joke out of it and kind of laughed it off versus taking ourselves too seriously, where we didn't really have to, was a good cultural moment for us to kind of set the tone and set expectations moving forward for how we address these kinds of situations. Because there's going to be more, there are going to be even worse mistakes that we make that are way more costly, that impact members in different ways, especially since we're touching something that's so personal to people. And so we need to be very careful in the right spots, but also keep perspective on which of these mistakes or missteps matter and which we can recover from somewhat quickly.
From your perspective, like when this was happening, like what were the next steps, like in your mind, like after seeing the J, how were we going from J to L?
Yeah. Luckily, we had planned ahead and had some L's on back order that weren't so far away. And so we bit the bullet and shipped a few hundred kits with J's. And we agreed that that was probably better than impacting orders. So we made the trade off. And then ultimately, enough inventory hit, and we were back in the black and back in control. And we're able to just kind of throw that whole set out and move on from it. But what did kind of come to mind was this was, I think I was 3 or 4 months in. This was my job. This is what I was focused on. Uh, and to make a mistake like that, not so much the mistake of the J, that was like a second order effect. To have missed on forecasting was probably the bigger one. And I think in my mind, it was like, wow, I'm supposed to have this on lockdown. Like, where did I miss such that we got into rough waters and then, had a bad incident as a result of it? And so there were times later on where once Chris Jones started and he was responsible for inventory, I stressed with him, like, you're going to make mistakes. Inventory issues are going to get tight, especially when we're trying to juggle all these things. Sam's solution is just order 100,000 and we'll never have this problem again, which is probably valid to an extent. And we did try to beef up on inventory as much as possible, but there's only so many of these in the world that they can make so quickly. And so accepting that these things are going to happen and just setting the tone. I think Chris then later ran into a similar issue where we had to use that screen printer again in a pinch. And even that workaround was fairly creative. It sounds obvious in hindsight, but we were short on inventory. These come from China, from a factory where they're printed and shipped. The idea that we could get creative and just work with the numbers that we had, we're talking a few thousand here. And I think I went to Yelp, found 10 screen printers in the Hayward/Oakland area, sent them all cold emails asking for a quote and making our timelines clear, and got 2 or 3 bites. It was like right around between, it was the week between Christmas and New Year's as well, 2020, during COVID. So these things kind of all stacked up, and just getting creative, thinking outside the box, and just solving the problem. Like, I could physically drive to Hayward and fix this problem. And if I was on the other side of the country, I'm sure we could have figured out some solution here with our partners at TruePill to work around.
Yeah, I forgot that it was also Christmas and New Year's. It was like this perfect storm of things working against us. But I think you said at the beginning, like, we made lemonade. And like, the more we talk about this story, I think it basically touches like on almost everything in our cultural handbook. One thing that just jumped out was rolling with the punches, right? And like being able to get creative. And also the other thing is, like, be calm. Don't freak out. Don't freak out. It's not the end of the world.
Hang on one sec, Mike. I'm just going to switch spots.
Yeah, go ahead. As one of our main models for living and breathing the Levels culture, like, what are your big takeaways from this that have applied from your other experiences here at Levels, or just really important learnings for you and for team members or anybody else that's watching this?
There's ownership, right? Just like owning a process, owning fixing it, owning a mistake when something goes wrong. There's moving quickly and being scrappy, which we talk about, and just being able to experiment, adapt, course correct when we need to. There's also the piece of, we try to avoid fire drills and urgency and just like manufactured sense of stress. But there's something about focusing on the details, painting the back of the fence. We mentioned these kinds of values too. And that's important even when you're moving quickly. And so we might have fire drills where we have to move fast and fix acute problems. But in those moments, we should also be really careful to pay attention to the details that matter there. It's interesting how this one story kind of brings a lot of those together.
I think ownership can mean a lot of different things. And one of the things that you said earlier, which I would say is extreme ownership, was you said it wasn't necessarily just the J. It was, hey, I'm responsible for forecasting. And right there, you probably embodied also like that calmness, right? Like, okay, this happened. let me communicate, share what happened, take a deep breath, and then move to the solution.
Yeah, and some prerequisites there. An environment of high trust really, really matters. So being on a solid foundation where you know you're trusted and you know that your abilities aren't being questioned lets you navigate these situations more effectively. And so that's an important environmental value that we need to maintain. The other piece on ownership is good to double click on. There's something valuable about an ownership structure where you are solely responsible for creating a problem and fixing a problem. There's no team to externalize this to. It wasn't someone else's fault. Like, I could blame COVID, I could blame supply chains, I could blame our supplier that used to have a 60-day turnaround and now is saying it would take 4 months. All those things are true, but also, okay, now what? Like, how do we actually fix the problem? We need performance covers in boxes going out, and we don't want to interrupt orders or, promotions that we might be doing or partnerships that are on stage. And so, maintaining very clear single threaded owners for areas, what we're now calling DRIs, directly responsible individuals. I think there's a lot of value in that structure, even as a company grows. Back then, it was me because there was no one else to really manage that. That had been handed off from you and from Josh from earlier days. Today, that's mostly Chris Jones and his world and member experience. But those kinds of projects are easier to now spread across multiple people, and you get less of a sense of ownership when everyone's responsible, right? There's that old catchy phrase, when everyone is responsible, no one is, something like this. But that idea holds true here. Might fail, or we might make mistakes, but get really, really valuable learnings as a team that come out of it. And again, coming back to an environment of high trust, like real trust, not kind of superficial trust, where you can experiment with those things in the right context, make the right mistakes, hopefully with minimal impact. But being okay with that and learning from it is the important part.